What if the only man who could save your life was a stranger in the middle of the Texas wilderness? The rifle shot still echoed across the wide Texas prairie when Beatatrice Sullivan woke with a jolt, her heart pounding so hard it almost hurt. The night was dark and silent again, except for the drunken shouts of the outlaws who had taken her 2 days ago. They had tied her to a wagon wheel like livestock, and now, by luck or fate, they were too distracted by their own argument to notice the rope slipping loose around her wrist. Beatatrice didn't waste the chance. Her hands trembled as she pulled the last knot free. She slid out from behind the wagon wheel, her legs stiff and weak from hours of being tied down. She glanced toward the campfire, where the Blackwell gang laughed, argued, and shoved each other like wolves fighting over scraps. 5 men had taken her wagon, her money, and her future. They had killed Samuel, the gentle driver who had guided her wagon from El Paso. They had promised a fate she refused to imagine. Beatatrice swallowed down her panic and moved into the shadows, careful not to disturb the rocks and dry brush under her bare feet. She had been a school teacher in Boston only months ago. She had never imagined she'd be fighting for her life in the wild loneliness of West Texas. She walked faster. The cool night wind dried the tears on her cheeks as she ran, the darkness swallowing her whole. By the time dawn touched the sky, her arms were scratched, her feet cut, and her throat painfully dry. She looked around and saw nothing but hills, dry grass, and empty land stretching forever. No water, no shelter, no one to protect her when the outlaws realized she had escaped. Beatatrice found a group of rocks that gave a little shade from the rising sun. She collapsed behind them, her breath ragged and her body shaking with exhaustion. She closed her eyes for only seconds before she heard it. Hoofbeats, slow, steady, coming from the east. Beatrice's heart jumped. If it was the gang, she was finished. She crawled toward the edge of the rock and peeked out. It wasn't the outlaws. A lone cowboy rode toward her on a large chestnut stallion, his shoulders broad, his hat pulled low, his silhouette tall and steady. He moved like someone who belonged to the land, someone who feared nothing. Beatatrice hesitated. Was he another danger or a chance at survival? Her fear lost to desperation. She stumbled from behind the rocks, waving her arms. "Help! Please, sir! Help me!" The cowboy pulled his horse up sharply, dust swirling around him. His hand moved to his holstered pistol, but his eyes studied her. Really studied her, taking in her torn dress, scratched arms, and the pure fear shaking her voice. "What's a woman doing out here alone?" he asked, his deep Texas drawl firm and suspicious. "I was taken by outlaws," she gasped. "The Blackwell gang. They stole my wagon. I escaped last night. They'll be looking for me." The cowboy's expression changed instantly, hardening into something dark and dangerous. He looked over the land behind her, then back at her. "Name's Brock Blackett," he said, extending one strong hand. "Get on. We need to move. Now." Quote. Beatrice didn't question him. She grabbed his hand and let him pull her up behind him. The stallion shifted under them, but Brock steadied the animal with a calm touch. "Hold tight, miss." Beatrice Sullivan." Brock nodded. "All right, Miss Sullivan. No one takes you again, not while I'm breathing." He nudged the horse forward into a fast gallop. The sudden speed almost threw her off, so she wrapped her arms around his waist, gripping the leather of his vest. She felt the steady strength of him, warm, solid, sure, everything she wasn't right now. She didn't know how long they rode, only that the world blurred around her as her body finally gave in to exhaustion. When Brock slowed his horse near a hidden canyon with a small spring, she almost fell when he helped her down. "You're safe here," Brock told her gently, steadying her with a hand on her arm. "Drink, rest. We'll move again soon." "Your ranch?" Beatrice echoed when he mentioned it. "I was traveling to San Antonio." "It's too far," he said simply, "and Blackwell's men are in the way. My ranch is closer and safer. Once things settle down, I'll get you to San Antonio myself." Something in his voice made her believe him. At the spring, Brock filled a canteen and handed it to her. Beatrice drank greedily, the cool water easing her burning throat. When she handed it back, their fingers brushed. She felt something warm, something she didn't expect from a stranger. "How did they catch you?" Brock asked. Beatrice told him everything. Her journey from Boston, her hopes of starting a new life as a teacher, the ambush, the murder of Samuel. Brock listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening when she mentioned Jed Blackwell. "They've been terrorizing these parts for months," Brock muttered. "The law's been after them but can't get close." "I overheard something," Beatrice whispered. "Devil's Canyon. They were planning a meeting there." That made Brock look up sharply. "That's important, Miss Sullivan. More important than you know." He stood, scanning the land again as if expecting danger to appear at any moment. "We need to get moving," he decided. "My ranch is safe. I'll protect you." Beatrice felt something shift inside her. It wasn't only safety she felt near him, it was trust, maybe even hope. As Brock helped her onto the horse again, Beatrice clung to him, letting herself breathe for the first time in days. Because for the first time since the Outlaws took her wagon, she felt she might actually live. And she didn't know why, but she felt safer in Brock Blackett's arms than she had anywhere else in her life. The moment Brock and Beatrice rode into the hidden canyon of the Triple B Ranch, everything felt different. She had escaped death only hours before, yet now she was stepping into a place that felt strangely safe. The house stood strong with a wraparound porch, the corral full of grazing horses, and ranch hands who stopped their work to stare in surprise as Brock rode in with a stranger clinging to his waist. Hank, the grizzled foreman, was the first to speak. "Everything all right, boss?" "No," Brock answered. "This is Miss Beatatrice Sullivan. She escaped the Blackwell gang. They might come looking." Quote. Hank's face darkened. "Those devils! Miss, you're safe now." Beatrice tried to smile, but her legs almost gave out when Brock helped her down from the horse. He held her up with one steady arm. Mrs. Winters, the ranch housekeeper, hurried out the door. "Oh, that poor child! Bring her in!" "She needs a hot bath and a warm meal." Beatrice hesitated, glancing at Brock as though she needed permission to walk away from him. "You're safe here," he assured her gently. "I'll be close." Something in his eyes made her heart flutter, but she followed Mrs. Winters inside. The warm water soothed the dirt and fear off her skin. When she put on the clean dress, borrowed from Brock's sister, she felt human again. But the moment she walked into the dining room and saw Brock standing there, cleaned up and handsome in a fresh shirt, her breath caught in her throat. "You look better," he said with a small smile that softened his rugged features. "Thanks to your kindness," she answered. Supper was simple, roast beef and cornbread. But to Beatrice, it tasted like hope. For the first time since her capture, she felt safe enough to breathe. She spoke with Brock's men, listened to their stories, even laughed. But every time she looked up, she found Brock watching her. Not with suspicion, but with something warmer, something protective. When supper ended, the conversation turned serious. "Blackwell won't give up," Hank warned, "not after losing his prize." Beatrice stiffened. "We'll protect her," Brock said firmly, "but we need to know everything she overheard." Beatrice swallowed hard and told them about the plan at Devil's Canyon, the meeting, the mention of a delivery, the names she remembered. Brock and Hank exchanged grim looks. "That's big trouble," Hank muttered. "Sheriff Davis needs to hear this," Brock decided. "We'll send Hank to town first thing in the morning." "But I shouldn't stay here," Beatrice said quietly. "I've put you all in danger." "You're staying," Brock said, his tone firm. "You're safer here than anywhere in Texas." There was no arguing with that voice. Something deep inside her felt strangely grateful he cared enough to insist. Later, as the sun set behind the hills and the ranch grew quiet, Beatrice stood alone in the dim hallway outside her guest room. Brock walked her there, stopping just outside the door. "You've had a hard day," he said softly. "You should rest." "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You don't owe me anything," he replied. "But I meant what I said earlier. No one takes you again. Not while I'm alive." Her heart fluttered at those words. "Good night, Brock." "Good night, Beatrice." He walked away slowly, as though he didn't want to leave her. Beatrice fell asleep quickly, exhaustion pulling her under. But her rest didn't last long. She woke to a sound she could barely understand at first, the distant thunder of horses. She sat up, heart pounding. Then she heard angry voices outside. Her blood ran cold. She rushed to the window just as shadows appeared along the ridge. Riders. Many riders. The Blackwell gang. Her scream barely left her throat before Mrs. Winters burst into the room, white-faced. "They're here!" she gasped. "Come quickly!" Beatrice followed as Mrs. Winters led her through the kitchen. Flour sacks were pushed aside, revealing a trapdoor. "Get inside, now!" I can't leave Brock out there," Beatrice whispered, trembling. Mrs. Winters grabbed her shoulders. "Listen to me, child. He'll fight better knowing you're hidden and safe." That broke her resistance. Beatrice climbed down into the dark room and watched as the trapdoor closed, leaving her in silence with only the dim glow of a lantern. She sat on a small cot, hugging herself. Gunfire exploded above. Men shouted. Horses screamed. Then, silence. Beatrice pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting tears. How long passed, she didn't know. Minutes or hours. Her hands shook from fear and helplessness. Then, footsteps. The pantry door opened. The sacks moved. The trapdoor lifted. Brock's face appeared. His cheek was bruised, jaw tight, knuckles scraped, but his eyes only searched for her. "It's safe," he breathed. "Beatrice, come on up." Quote, she reached for his hand, and when she climbed out, she threw herself into his arms without thinking. He held her tightly, one hand cradling the back of her head, his voice low and thick. "They didn't get you. Thank God they didn't get you." Beatrice trembled against him. "What happened?" she asked. "They demanded to search the house," Brock said. "I convinced them we'd seen you riding east. They were angry, but believed it enough to move on." He pulled back just enough to look in her face. "But they'll be back." This was only the beginning. A shiver ran through Beatrice. "Then what do we do now?" she whispered. Brock's eyes darkened with determination. "We get you somewhere safer, Miss Sullivan, and I go after Blackwell myself." Before she could speak, he added, "I won't let him touch you. Not ever again." She looked up at him, breath unsteady. For the first time, Beatrice realized something powerful and terrifying. Brock Blackett wasn't only protecting her out of duty, he cared, deeply. Beatrice had barely slept after the attack. Every sound outside the Triple B felt sharper, closer, more threatening. Brock, however, moved through the ranch with a calm strength that steadied her more than anything else could. By morning, he had made a decision. "We leave tonight," he told her. "You're going somewhere Blackwell would never think to look. The Bar None Ranch. Ben and Sarah Reynolds will keep you safe." Beatrice's heart twisted. "And you?" "I'll go after Blackwell," he said, "with Sheriff Davis, with every man willing to stand. I can't let him strike again." Something inside her tightened painfully. "Brock, what if?" He stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "Nothing will happen to me, and when this is over, I'll come back for you." Her breath caught. "Promise?" Brock didn't hesitate. "I promise." That night, under the cover of darkness, they rode out. Brock kept his horse close to hers, always watching the shadows, always protective. Beatrice clung to the saddle horn, praying for safety for Brock, for the courage she needed to see this through. But danger came faster than either expected. Just as they reached a narrow pass between two rocky hills, gunfire exploded from above. Brock reacted instantly. "Ambush!" he shouted. He pulled his horse in front of Beatrice's, shielding her as bullets cracked against the rocks. Dust exploded around them. Beatrice ducked low, heart racing. "Stay with me," Brock called. He returned fire, forcing the attackers to retreat a few steps, but they were pinned. The narrow pass offered no escape. "There's a game trail," Brock said quickly. "Back that way. You follow it to the Reynolds place." "I'm not leaving you," Beatrice cried. "You have to," Brock insisted. "I'll draw their fire. You ride hard and don't stop." Beatrice's throat closed. "No, please, don't do this alone." Brock caught her face in his hand for a single desperate moment. "Beatrice, if anything happened to you," his voice broke. "Go, please." Tears blurred her vision. She leaned forward and kissed his cheek, trembling. "For luck," she whispered. He swallowed hard. "Ride?" Beatrice turned Daisy and urged her back up the trail. Behind her, Brock fired again, shouting to pull the attackers. "Focus!" She didn't look back. She couldn't. The sound of gunfire chased her long after the canyon disappeared behind her. It was dawn when she reached the Bar None Ranch. Her voice cracked as she called for help, barely staying in the saddle. Ben Reynolds caught her before she fell. "What happened?" "Ambush," she gasped. Brock stayed behind. "Please, help him." Ben didn't wait. Within minutes, he had gathered his men and galloped toward the hills. Beatrice could only watch as they disappeared. Hours crawled by. She tried to rest, but fear kept her awake. Sarah Reynolds sat beside her, holding her shaking hands. "Ben will find him," she said softly. "Brock's stubborn, hard to kill. Believe me." Beatrice nodded, but her heart twisted painfully with every passing minute. Then, hoofbeats. She jumped up, rushing to the porch. Ben rode in first. Then, the sheriff. Then, Beatrice's breath left her. Brock, alive, bloody, exhausted, limping, but alive. Beatrice ran to him, her tears falling before she reached his arms. Brock caught her, pulling her close, holding her as though he'd never let her go again. "You're safe," she whispered against his chest. "You're safe." "So are you," Brock breathed, pressing his forehead to hers. "I told you I'd come back." For a long moment they simply held each other. Nothing else mattered, but one thing wasn't over. "Blackwell?" Beatrice whispered. Brock's expression hardened. He wasn't there, only hired guns. Blackwell still out there. Fear pooled in Beatrice's stomach. "He'll come again? You know he will." "I do," Brock said softly. "Which is why I'm taking you home. And when he shows himself—" His eyes darkened. "He won't leave again." They returned to the Triple B together. For days, the ranch prepared for the fight they knew was coming. Brock never left Beatrice alone. If she walked to the barn, he walked with her. If she helped Mrs. Winters in the kitchen, he stayed close. Beatrice could feel the storm growing between them, fear, hope, tenderness, longing. One night, under the quiet glow of the oil lamp, Brock finally spoke the words that had been building between them. "When this is over, when Blackwell is gone, I want you to stay," he said. "Not because you're in danger, not because you need protection, but because I need you." Beatrice's breath caught. "Brock." He reached for her hand, his voice shaking slightly. "I don't have fancy words. I'm just a rancher. But I know what I feel. And I know I don't want a life without you in it." Tears pooled in her eyes. "I don't want to leave. Not anymore." Before he could answer, a shout echoed from outside. "Riders incoming!" Beatrice froze. Brock grabbed his rifle. "Stay behind me." She followed him to the front room, heart pounding. And then the front door slammed open. Jed Blackwell stood in the doorway with a pistol in his hand and hatred in his eyes. "I told you I'd be back for what's mine," he growled. Beatrice gasped, and Blackwell fired. The bullet struck her before she could duck. Pain exploded through her shoulder, knocking her backward into Brock's arms. "Beatrice!" Brock shouted, catching her as she fell. Rage unlike anything he'd ever known filled him. He fired at Blackwell, driving him out onto the porch. Gunshots erupted. Brock fought like a man with nothing left to lose. Blackwell fired again, but Brock's final shot hit true. Jed Blackwell fell. The nightmare was over. Brock dropped his gun and rushed to Beatrice, gathering her in his arms. "Stay with me," he begged, his voice breaking. "Please, Beatrice, stay." She touched his cheek weakly. "Told you you'd come back?" She managed a small smile before closing her eyes. Brock held her close as the men ran to help. He whispered the vow he had carried from the moment he found her alone on the prairie. "No one takes you again. Not now. Not ever."